Hi guys, and welcome to today's task. For today's task, we are going to deviate from the house renovation and we are going to work on something a little bit more recreational and one of my biggest hobbies, which is going out on my four-wheeler. And I bought a set of tracks last year so that I can use my four-wheeler year-round. And if you're on the fence about getting a set of tracks or thought about it, I'm going to show you how simple it is to really put them on every season. This is the front left track and the rear left track is behind me. Those are the ones I'm going to show you how to put on today. But I like to store them with all of the hardware all put together, at least bolted together. So first things first is you want to just kind of disassemble this real quick. Undo all your bolts, make sure all these pieces are off. This is a rock guard for the front end, and I do take that off just to put on the four-wheeler, and then when it's on, I'll put that back on. And when taking stuff off, I do like to at least kind of bolt the bolts back through a little bit, just so it keeps some parts together. Now with all the hardware off on that track and it's ready to be assembled back on the machine, we're going to take this tire off. I recommend breaking the bolts loose while the tire is on the ground. It just grips a little bit better. You're not fighting the tire rotation, and then we'll jack it up and slide the tire underneath to keep the four-wheeler up in case it falls down with the jack giving way in any way possible. Sometimes you got to use the leverage you got. After you take this wheel off, you're going to have to take this brush guard off, and it's easiest to access it once the wheel's gone. You undo one bolt and then unclip it, and then you have full exposure to this A-arm, which is what we're going to attach part of the track system to. This is the part that gets a little tricky, but you need to wheel your track over into place and lift it on just like you would the tire. And lining these bolts up can be a real bear cat. Depending on how your wheel lines up, you have this piece that gets in the way, so you can only get to 1, 2, and maybe 3 lug nuts at this time, and then you need to rotate it one more time and try to get to that 4th one. Now that we've attached the track to the hub of the four-wheeler, we still have hardware that we need to attach, but it's easiest to attach this when the four-wheeler is down. So I'm going to put the other side on, and then we'll drop the front end. We've taken the jack out, and both of these are attached to the hubs, and now the hardware lines up really, really simple. So it's the best time to actually bolt this A-arm bracket to your actual A-arm. So I've gone and got all my hardware that we took off earlier and just gotten it re-prepped and laid out for me to put on. It feels like stuff's not going to line up very well, but I promise it will. If you're ever assembling something that has multiple bolts or screws or anything like that, it's a really bad idea to just screw one in as tight as you can and then try to work your way through the rest. It's so much easier to just get all the bolts started a little bit, get things lined up, and then start cranking them down. So I'm going to start with this first one that goes at the bottom of the A-arm, line it up, oops, lost my spacer, loosely line it up, get that bolt set in place, and just get the nut started on there. So I'm going to take the back bracket, and it luckily has square holes, so these are carriage bolts, and they sit into that square hole, so I don't need a wrench on both sides, which is super convenient. Get it started on one side and lined up, and just put a first nut on. And sometimes the bolts are just going to fight you, just keep at it. Whatever you do, make sure they're not stripped. Don't force it, just make sure it loosely slides on. If it doesn't, then it's probably going on cockeyed or something. Now with everything loosely set in place, let's go ahead and tighten them down. Last but not least, we'll put our brush guard back on. All right, our front end is all the way assembled. All of the hubs have been mounted, all of the A-arm brackets have been mounted, and now all of our brush guards have been mounted on there. They are super dirty, and we are ready to work our way back to the back end. First thing we're gonna do is, like the front end, break all of the lug nuts loose, and then we'll lift it in the air. And because my drill gave out on me, I'm using an old pipe and my socket wrench just to give me enough leverage to break these bolts loose. Just like the front tracks, I've gone ahead and taken apart all of the hardware so that it's ready to assemble when we mount it up. And the next step will be to mount this hub to this hub. And just like with our front end, it seems to line up this bracketry a little bit better if the four-wheeler is not jacked up anymore and is squatting back into its kind of regular stance position. So I'm going to lower the jack. Okay, after a couple of minutes of trial and error, I got this side assembled. I just couldn't remember the secret to it, and it's really simple. There is this piece, and it bolts to this small piece of bracket right there. And in order to get this piece to sit in properly, you have to feed it up underneath and in a really, really tight spot. But it is built to fit around this bracketry right here. This cutout sits around the inside of this shock bracketry, but you just have to wiggle it into place a little bit, kind of finagle it, and it's easiest to do it without the bolts in. Now just tighten those bolts up now that they're started. You guys, this is definitely a different project than you're probably used to on this channel, but ATVs are probably my biggest passion next to doing carpentry and all that kinds of stuff. So they will be more videos about four-wheelers and off-roading and things like that. But this was just a fun one for the season for this time of year. If you guys like today's video, give it a thumbs up. If you're new to the channel, subscribe, and we'll see you guys next time. I'll show you how to put them on. Come with me. That's stupid. Come with me for the fun time. And the front, sorry.
You guys want to see a winch?
Yeah.
Say yes.
I said, yeah. We'll turn this thing off.
Well, this one's what?
For the tracks. So you're gonna wheel your, and depending on how your wheel lines up, you have a huge, what's that, I don't know what that. But if we rely, oh sorry, what's the word I'm thinking? I don't know. There's auxiliary hardware. Okay, you gotta be quiet for a second, okay bud? It's never gonna, if you're ever assembling, here's a pro tip, and I think I've said this before, but if you're ever assembling something that has multiple bolts, gosh, then I'm gonna take the back bracket, Lincoln, you gotta stop moving, bud, and slide that in. Oops, sorry, actually. Now with everything loosely set, and last but not least, we'll put our little lever. Oh. In the back, there's only 2 bolts, so we just, how did that go up there? It sits around this, what am I saying here?